Hello, hello. Hello, guys. How you doing? I am a little tired, but I'm here and I'm gonna read stories. um, I'm sorry if my voice sounds a little funky. I'm a little sick, but I really wanted to stream today. So here I am. Let me know if the audio is okay. I messed around with it a little bit and it sounded fine to me, but I know everybody's like volumes are different. But I think it should be okay. Thank you for lurking, buddy. Hi Nando, how are you? How are you doing? Let me know if the audio is okay. I sound a little sniffly. I apologize for that. I should have made I should have probably made tea instead of hot cocoa. I don't think hot cocoa is good for the throat. But I want to adjust things before anything. Good to hear you're doing good. I feel like I'm not listening to it. I think if I were to listen to it, it would double for you guys, but I hope the audio is okay. And the fireplace sounds okay. It took me forever to find, like, the right kind of fireplace, not music, fireplace ambiance for this. It took me forever because I couldn't find a site that had it longer than, like, 2 seconds. I should have asked my editor, but he was busy. Okay. Alright. Also, I at the my last the last story that we're gonna read, I'm gonna have a little presentation for it because I'm extra like that right now. That's just how today has been. But I should probably move my phone down, chat down here. So I'm sorry if you guys, if I look down too much, I just moved this, but it's okay. It should be fine. Okay, without further ado, we're gonna start off tonight with The Elves and the Shoemaker. I was going to read, A Christmas Carol, but it is longer than I thought it was. It is so long, and I don't think my voice can take it. Maybe next year. Okay. First story. A shoemaker, by no fault of his own, had become so poor that at last he had nothing left but leather for one pair of shoes. So in the evening, he cut out the shoes which he wished to begin to make the next morning. And as he did in good conscience, he lay down quietly in his bed, committed himself to God, and fell asleep. In the morning after he said his prayers, and just going to sit down to work, the 2 shoes stood quite finished on his table. He was astounded, and knew not what to say to it. He took the shoes in his hands to observe them closer, and they were so neatly made that there was not one bad stitch in them, just as if they were intended as a masterpiece. Soon after, a buyer came in, and the shoes pleased him so well he paid more for them than what was customary. And, with the money, the shoemaker was able to purchase leather for 2 pairs of shoes. He cut them out at night, and the next morning was about to set to work with fresh courage. But he had no need to do so, for when he got up, they were already made, and buyers were also not wanting, who gave him money enough to buy leather for 4 pairs of shoes. The following morning, too, he found 4 pairs made, and it went on constantly. What he cut out in the evening was finished by the morning, so that he soon had his honest independence again, and at last became a wealthy man. Now it befell that one evening, not long before Christmas, then the man had been cutting out, he said to his wife before going to bed, "What think you if we were to stay up tonight to see who it is that lends us the helping hand?" The woman liked the idea, and lighted a candle, and then they hid themselves in a corner of the room, behind some clothes which were hanging up there, and watched. When it was midnight, Two pretty little naked men came down, sat down by the shoemaker's table, and took all of the work which was cut out from the night before and began to stitch and sew and hammer so skillfully and so quickly with their little fingers that the shoemaker could not turn away his eyes for astonishment. They did not stop until all was done and stood finished on the table, and they quickly ran away. Next morning, the woman said, "These little men have made us rich, and we really must show that we are grateful for it. They run about so, and have nothing on, and must be cold. I'll tell thee what I'll do. I'll make them little shirts and coats and vests and trousers, and knit both of them a pair of stockings, and do thou too make them 2 little pairs of shoes." The man said, "I shall be very glad to do it." And one night, when everything was ready, they laid their presents all together on the table instead of the cut-out work, and then concealed themselves to see how the little men would behave. At midnight, they came bounding in and wanted to get to work at once. But as they did not find any leather cut out, but only the pretty little articles of clothing, they were first astonished, and then they showed intense delight. They dressed themselves, and with the greatest rapidity putting the clothes on and singing, "Now we are boys too fine to see. Why should we longer cobblers be?" And they danced and skipped and leapt over chairs and benches. At least they danced at the doors. From what time forth they came no more, but as long as the shoemaker lived all went well, and well with him, and all his undertakings prospered. Second story. There once was a poor servant girl, who was industrious and cleanly, and swept the house every day, and emptied her sweepings on the great heap in front of the door. One morning, when she was just going back to her work, she found a letter on this heap, and as she could not read, she put her broom in the corner and took the letter to her master and mistress. And behold, it was an invitation from the elves, who asked the girl to hold a child for them at its christening. The girl did not know what to do, but at length, after much persuasion, and as they told her it was not right to refuse an invitation of this kind, she consented. Then 3 elves came and conducted her to a hollow mountain where the folks lived. Everything there was small, but more elegant and beautiful than can be described. The baby's mother lay in a bed of black ebony ornamented with pearls, and coverlids were embroidered with gold. The cradle was of ivory, the bath of gold. The girl stood as godmother, and then wanted to go home again, but the little elves urgently entreated her to stay 3 days with them. So she stayed, and passed the time in pleasure and gaiety, and the little folks did all they could to make her happy. At last she set out on her way home. Then first they filled her pockets quite full of money, and after that they let her out of the mountain again. When she got home, she wanted to begin her work, and took the broom, which was still standing in the corner, and in her hand and began to sweep. Then some strangers came out to the house, who asked her who she was, and what business had she there. And she had not, as she thought, been 3 days with the little men in the mountains, but 7 years. And in the meantime, her former masters had died. Well, that's dark. Hi, Zeno. How you doing? Third story. A certain mother's child had been taken away out of its cradle by the elves, and a changeling with a large set of eyes, large head and staring eyes, which would do nothing but eat and drink, laid in its place. In her trouble, she went to her neighbor and asked her advice. The neighbor said that she was to carry the changeling into the kitchen, set it down on the hearth, light a fire, and boil some water in 2 eggshells, which would make a changeling laugh, and if he laughed, all would be over with him. The woman did everything that her neighbor bade her, and she put the eggshells with water on the fire. The imp said, "I am as old now as the Wester forest, but never yet have I seen anyone boil anything in an eggshell," and began to laugh at it. Whilst he was laughing, suddenly came a host of little elves, who brought the right child, set it down on the hearth, and took the changeling away with them. I haven't seen the other 2 stories for this, but I thought it was just the one. But that one's that one. This is gonna be a shorter stream because I am a little sick, so I would like to lay down for a little bit after stream. But I'm still gonna stream. This is still gonna be here. Oh, I need to change the... What we're reading. Sir? Sir is now wanting to change. Why not? Finally. I'm a good streamer. I promise. Hope you guys are doing okay. Hope you guys are doing well. I think my meds are kicking in. There we go. I need to make this a little bigger. Oh my god, why did it change it to blurry? Why is it so blurry? That's fine. Okay. Next. The Little Match Girl by Hansen Christian Andersen. Most terribly cold it was. It snowed and was nearly quiet dark. An evening, the last evening of the year, in this cold and darkness, there went along the street a poor little girl, bareheaded with naked feet. When she left home, she had slippers on, it is true, but what was the good of that? They were very large slippers, which her mother had I've never seen that word. Hitherto worn, so large were they, and the little thing lost them as she scuffled away across the street, because of two carriages that rolled by dreadfully fast. One slipper was nowhere to be found, the other had been laid hold of by an urchin, and he ran off with it. He thought it would do capitally for a cradle when he would someday or should have children himself. So the little maiden walked on with her tiny naked feet, and that were quite red and blue from the cold. She carried a quantity of matches in an old apron, and she held a bundle of them in her hand. Nobody had bought anything of her the whole livelong day. No one had given her a single farthing. She crept along, trembling with cold and hunger, a very picture of sorrow. The poor little thing! The flakes of snow covered her long hair, which fell in beautiful curls around her neck. But of course, she never once thought. From all the windows the candles were gleaming, and it smelt so deliciously of roast goose, for you know it was New Year's Eve. Yes, of that she thought. In a corner, formed by two houses, of which one advanced more than the other, she seated herself down and cowered together. Her little feet had drawn up close to her, but she grew colder and colder, and to go home she did not venture. For she had not sold any matches and could not bring a farthing of money. From her father she would certainly get blows, and at home it was cold too, for above her she only had the roof, through which the wind whistled, even though the largest cracks were stopped up with straw and rags. Her little hands were almost numbed with cold. Oh, a match might afford her a world of comfort, if only she dared to take a single one out of the bundle, draw it against the wall, and warm her fingers by it. She drew one out. Oh, how it blazed, how it burnt! It was warm, bright. It was a warm, bright flame, like a candle as she held her hands over it. It was a wonderful light. It seemed really to the little maiden as though she was sitting before a large iron stove, with burnished brass feet and brass ornament at top. The fire burned with such blessed influence, it warmed so delightfully. The little girl had already stretched out her feet to warm them too. But the small flame went out. The stove vanished. She had only the remains of the burnt-out match in her hand. She rubbed another against the wall. It burned brightly, and where the light fell on the wall came transparent like a veil, so that she could see into a room. On the table was spread a snow-white tablecloth. Upon it was a splendid porcelain service, and the roast goose was steaming famously with stuffing of apple and dried plums. And what was still more capable to behold was, the goose hopped down from the dish, rolled about on the floor with a knife and fork in its breast, till it came up to the poor little girl. When the match went out and nothing but the thick, cold, damp wall was left behind, she lighted another match. Now there she was, sitting under the most magnificent Christmas tree. It was still larger and more decorated than the one she had seen through the glass door in the rich merchant's house. Thousands of lights were burning on the green branches, and gaily colored pictures such as she had seen in the shop windows looked down upon her. The little maiden stretched her hand out towards them when the match went out. The lights of the Christmas tree rose higher and higher. She saw them now as stars in heaven. One fell down and formed a long trail of fire. "Someone is just dead," said the little girl, for her old grandma, the only person who had loved her and who was now no more, had told her that when a star falls, a soul ascends to God. She drew another match against the wall. It was again light, and in the luster there stood the old grandmother, so bright and radiant, so mild, with such an expression of love. "Grandmother," cried the little one, "oh, take me with you. You go away when the match burns out. You vanish like the warm stove, like the delicious roast goose, and the magnificent Christmas tree." And she rubbed the whole bundle of matches quickly against the wall, for she wanted to be quite sure of keeping her grandmother near her. And the matches gave such a brilliant light that it was brighter than a noonday. Never formerly had the grandmother been so beautiful and so tall. She took the little maiden on her arm, and both flew in brightness and in joy so high, so very high. And then above was neither cold, nor hunger, nor anxiety. They were with God. But in the corner, at the cold hour of dawn, sat the poor little girl, with rosy cheeks, with a smiling mouth, leaning against the wall, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. Stiff and stark sat the child there with her matches, of which one bundle had been burnt. She wanted to warm herself, people said. No one had the slightest suspicion of what beautiful things she had seen. No one even dreamed of the splendor in which, with her grandmother, she had entered on the joys of the new year. That one's sad. Why did I pick a sad one? Goodness. I like that one though. I remember when I was little and my mom read that to me, I was so confused as to why people weren't helping her. The world's kinda terrible sometimes. Next is the gift of the Magi. The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved by one and two at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with a silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Delia counted $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing left to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Delia did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout of the mendicancy squad. In the vestibule below, there was a letterbox into which no letter would go, an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also, appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its processor was being paid $30 a week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young. Already introduced to you as Delia, which is all very good. Delia finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she only had $1.87 which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning something nice for him. Something fine and rare and sterling. Something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 bat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtained a fairly accurate conception of what this looks like. Dahlia, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it all fall to its full length. Now there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's golden watch that had been his father's and great-grandfather's. The other was Dahlia's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the airshaft, Dahlia would have let her hair hang out the window someday to dry just to depreciate her majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor, with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard with envy. So now Dahlia's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her, and then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown coat, on went her old brown hat, and with a whirl of skirts and the brilliant sparkle in her eyes, she cluttered out the door and down to the streets below. When she stopped, the sign read, MME Sofroni, hair goods of all kinds. 1/8 up Dahlia ran, and collected herself, panting. Madam, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofroni. Will you buy my hair? Asked Dahlia. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Dahlia. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped on rosy wings. Pardon me. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone, and not by meticulous or meretricious ornamentation. As all good things should do, it was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him. Quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 78 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Dahlia reached home, her intoxication gave way to a little prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love. Which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made, and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Dahlia doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying little silent prayers from the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please God, make him think I'm still pretty." The door opened and Jim stepped in, and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22, and to be burdened with a family? He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stepped inside the door as immovable as a setter of the scent of a quail. His eyes were fixed upon Delia, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments which she had been prepared for. He simply I'm Maisie. He simply stared at her fixedly with the He simply stared at her fixedly with that particular expression on his face. Delia wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut your hair?" asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at the patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Delia. "Don't you like me just as well anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said with an air almost of idiocy. "You didn't look for it," said Delia. "It's sold, I tell you. Sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you." "Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on with a sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quick to wake. He enfolded his Delia. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in some other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year, what is the difference? A mathematician or a wit could give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a packet from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Delia," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." White fingers and Nibble tore at the string of paper. And then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all comforting powers of the lord of the flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Delia had worshipped for long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell, with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers, but the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Delia leaped up like a singed cat and cried, "Oh! Oh!" Jim had not yet seen his present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," he said, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep 'em a while. They're too nice to just use as presents. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now suppose you put the chops on." The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in the case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of 2 foolish children of flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. And in the last word to the wise of these days, let it be that all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they were the wisest. Everywhere they are the wisest. They are the Magi. He's one of my favorite stories. Hold on, I have to take a drink. Hello, Maisie. How are you doing? I'm losing my voice, but it is okay. Good thing. I only have the one story left, and I actually have to put it up on screen. My hands are shaky. Cap it. Now let's see if this will. Oh my god, it's covering my face. I need to move it over. I can delete these now. Remove. Bear with me a second. I don't want to make it too small because I want you guys to be able to read it. I don't know where to put it. It's so squished. Is that okay? I hope so. I can make it bigger. Hold on. Should I have it in front of me? That should be fine, I think. I'm gonna make another text just in case. Oop. I can just duplicate this one. Paste. I feel like this is so small. Okay, let me know how that looks. Because I don't know. But this should be fine, I think. I'm gonna put you guys back up here. Oh, geez. There we go. Okay. Now, I wanted to do a funny voice for this one, but I don't think I can. But I will try my best. Alright. Every Who down at Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down at Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow's Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with his grinchy fingers nervously drumming, I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early, they'd rush for their toys, and then, oh the noise, noise. That's one thing he hated. The noise. Same though. And then the Whos, young and old, would sit down to feast. And they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast. They would feast on Who pudding, and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together. With Christmas bells ringing, they'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? He's 53. And then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do. The Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. And he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I just look like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. And the Grinch looked around, but since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. And so he called his dog Max, then he took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Poor Max. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. And then the Grinch said, "Giddy up!" And the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Who's were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square. "This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. He then slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flute, where the little Who's stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. And then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. And he stuffed on the bags. Then the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimbley. Chimbley? Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took the last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee, and now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. He then grabbed the tree, and he started to shove, when he heard a small sound, like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast, and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou who was no more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who just got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why? But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. Why, my sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied. There's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, and I'll bring it back here. And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. The last thing he took was the log from their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but some hooks and some wire. And then one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 1/4 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze, when he packed up his sled. Packed it up with their presents, their ribbons, their wrappings, the tags, and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tiptoe to dump it. Hoo-hoo to the Who's. Hoo-hoo to the Who's. He was Grinchishly humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch. That I must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear, and he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, Then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so. But it was very merry. Very. Pardon me. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. This is hard to read. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. However or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day, and the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with the load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast, and he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. Okay. I love the movies for The Grinch Stole Christmas, especially Jim Carrey's. Like, it's just a classic. I really wish I could stream it on stream. I think that would be so fun. I know I wanna watch movies in the Discord. I really do. But the streaming quality is terrible. But I think that's all for me. My throat's trying to kill me, and my meds are kicking in. I can kind of tell. So I'm gonna find somebody to raid really quickly. I'm sorry this stream was very short. It was just like an hour. But I really wanted to stream today, and I really want to stream Thursday as well. I'm not entirely sure what I'll do for that one. But I hope you guys had fun. Thank you guys for staying and listening to me read. I'm losing my train of thought really bad. I'm sleepy. But let me find you somebody to go watch. Do we want to go say hi to Thrin? Let's go say hi to Thrin. I haven't seen him in a while. Raid slash. Nope. Slash raid. I think that's how you spell it. No, it is not. That's not how you say it. It's Davale. Beep, beep, beep. I can't even type right. I'm sorry. I apologize, guys. Let's see. THRYNN. Da 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 da. Hopefully. Okay. Alrighty, guys. I'll see you guys later. Bye.